G'day everyone, I am Charlie Brown and today we have a special segment. We are here with TTOR with a interview. Hello TTOR.
Hello there, Charlie. It's good to be here.
Alrighty, so we got a few questions for you today. Question number 1, why did you start CreationSocial?
Well, the primary reason I founded CreationSocial is because of Gab censorship, but I think I should explain that just a little bit more, with a little bit more background info. Back in 2017, when YouTube and all, big tech censorship was starting to ramp up a bit, I realized, man, we really need alternatives to all these platforms. And so I was looking for alternatives to all these platforms that were in the alt tech world. And that's when I came across BitChute and NewTube, or I guess it was called PewTube back then. And I came across VidMe, and the social media sites I came across were Minds and Gab. So I started using Gab in December of 2017, and from that time all the way up until sometime in the late summer, early fall of 2020, Gab was actually a fun place to be. There seemed at the time to be true freedom of speech, and people who weren't popular could be just as visible as people who were popular on the site. You actually could access a whole bunch of information on the site that you weren't accessing in big tech social media sites in general, and you were really learning some good information about the things they didn't want you to know about. It was actually a fun place to be. I remember I used to spend hours a day on Gab back when it was fun. But then over time, especially in 2020, they started censoring people. And the thing that really woke me up was in late September of 2020 when Gab banned Brett Keane from their site because he dared to question why an article about a three-way gangbang was trending in the Gab Trends section of the site. And his reward for questioning that was to get banned from Gab. And after that happened, I realized, wow, Gab just banned somebody that I actually have done multiple collaborations with, who I've talked to many times and did videos back and forth with. And, this is someone I actually know pretty well as you can know someone from the other side of the country from you. And they banned him. And it was at that moment that I knew, man, I can't trust Gab long term. So I decided, since Gab was going in the direction of becoming a Facebook alternative instead of a Twitter alternative, I decided to create my own Facebook alternative that was not only an alternative to Facebook, but ultimately an alternative to Gab, because ultimately I didn't trust Andrew Torba to actually defend freedom of speech. And in the time that has passed since then, we've seen multiple people get banned from Gab, including yourself. And we've seen them centralize their stuff even more. And basically, he's trying to copy every big tech service there is, which includes payment processing. And he's even talked about building his own version of the Matrix right after he condemned the Facebook metaverse version of it for being a satanic mind control device. So you can thank Andrew Torba as for why I decided to create CreationSocial. His censorship and all the stuff he's done after he spent years pretending to be our friend and champion of freedom and freedom of speech, I decided, you know what? I'm going to take some initiative like he's been telling people, or like he used to tell people, and I'm going to build my own site. And so that's what led me to create CreationSocial ultimately.
Yeah, you're spot on. I remember using it for a while back when it was Gab AI, and it was good. My followers and traction was going up and up and up. And then, yeah, around when Brett Keane got done over is when I started losing traction. And I also mentioned to the admins, and I think even to Torba, about, why is all this stuff trending when I never see it on my feeds. There's a direct difference between what is apparently trending and what is actually trending on everyone's feed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you go to their Explore page today, and basically the only things you see there are Andrew Torba's posts, the posts of popular creators who are, popular on the site, and the posts of the politicians who are on the site. And then anytime someone who's not in those first three categories makes it into Explorer, it's usually because they've been promoted by someone in the first three categories. You don't see anybody small organically making it to the trending section anymore on Gab.
So it's just like mainstream tech now.
Yep. Pretty much.
Alrighty, so question number 2. What open source software do you use for CreationSocial or in your own life creating content?
Well, if you count OBS as open source, which I think it is, that's
Yep.
the system I use to record my videos. I've been using it since 2019 after Brett Keane showed me how to use it. And I've enjoyed using that for content creation. That's what I use for all of my TTOR videos now. And that's what I've used for the CreationSocial videos I've made for the CreationSocial channel on Joshu TV. And I use it for some of my gaming videos when I can make the system work with the game. But that's less important in this particular discussion. As far as CreationSocial goes, I wanted to use an open source project that I didn't see anybody else using at the time that was actually good, and that's how I came across the open source social network. I actually bought the premium version of the open source social network script back in 2020, and that's what I used to initially create CreationSocial. That, and I used the Fakebook theme they had that made the site kind of look like the older version of Facebook. Now, the free open source version of the script that's on GitHub, I don't believe is the full script. I think it's like the free version, so it has some stuff but not others. I got the premium version because it had pretty much all the components you'd want right out of the box, and then you could just go into their free components section on their site and add components for free, which is how I added a lot of the features to CreationSocial over time that I did. But there was a new update recently to the script that made me get the new version of it, and we'll talk about that more when we get to that part of the conversation.
Awesome. Right, well, compared to 10, 20 years ago, it's great that all this open source software exists now. Like, a lot of people back in the day were limited to stuff like XSplit that got bundled with a lot of software and hardware, but now everyone is predominantly using OBS for streaming and recording videos, so that's good. A lot of people are using Audacity, which allows you just to record voice or edit sound clips.
Yeah.
Stuff like Mumble and Delta Chat, and even things like Firefox and Chrome are open source. I know that Firefox used to be Netscape, and it's changed a lot over the years. And we've got things like OpenOffice, and then came along a different version of it called LibreOffice. So that allows you to do the Office type stuff without ponying up money for WordPerfect or Microsoft Office, or having to use the Google Docs as well.
Mm-hmm.
Alrighty, so number 3 on the question: why do you choose open source software over closed source software?
Well, I know I just finished explaining that I had to spend money for the premium version of the open source social network script, but generally speaking, open source software tends to be available for free, whereas closed source software is you have to pay whatever amount of money to get the license to use their software, and then you don't really have, from what I understand, you don't have full control over the software itself. So like if the developers make a change to the software, it basically shows up on your site. I don't know if that's automatically done or if you have to like agree to it, but that's generally what I see. And of course, the problem with this whole paying to get a license to use the software is, in theory, the people who gave you the license can revoke your license at any time, especially if they decide that they don't want their software to be used to host content that they don't like. So that's a pitfall that can happen with closed source software. Plus, it's also an issue of transparency. When you have open source software, if you know how to read the code, you can literally see the code for the entire project, and you know whether or not censorship is at play in the site script and all that jazz. Whereas with closed source, You don't know what's in there. You can make some educated guesses based off of the activity of the site, but you ultimately don't know what's in there. So open source is also an issue of transparency, and I don't want people to think I'm trying to pull a fast one on them. I want them to know, if they're really that interested, I want them to know the code of the site.
Fair enough. Alrighty, so question number 4. Why do you support freedom of speech?
Well, I support freedom of speech for a couple of reasons. First and foremost, this has been my thinking for years, pretty much the whole time I've been doing content creation of any kind. If I want to prove that somebody is wrong about something, then they have to be able to talk. So, like, if I want to prove that an evolutionist YouTuber is wrong about evolution and whatever scientific thing he's saying or whatever he's saying about the Bible, I want to be able to actually show him saying these things either in video or in an audio file or in an article or whatever. Like, I want to actually show them saying the things I'm claiming they are saying so that people can't claim I'm making stuff up, and then I respond accordingly. If people I disagreed with were censored and not allowed to speak, then I wouldn't actually be able to prove that they're wrong. And on top of that, people would get the impression that they are probably right because they're not allowed to speak. So by having all sides being allowed to speak freely, you can actually have an open, honest discussion about whatever it is you're having an open, honest discussion about, and then people can make up their own minds about what the truth is. They don't need someone to play nanny or arbiter and decide for them what the truth is. People, I think, generally speaking, if they're allowed to, I think they can figure things out for themselves to one degree or another.
Fair enough. Good to see. Not many Christians I've come across in the last 25 years support free speech, so it's a refreshing change. Alrighty, so another question, number 5. Do you allow certain controversial topics such as flat earth, nationalism, and so-called conspiracy theorists' ideas on CreationSocial?
Yes, I do. But before I talk further about that, let me see if I can bring up my terms of service for CreationSocial, because I'm going to need that for reference. Because there is some stuff that we don't allow, but it's the kind of stuff that I think no one would really have a problem with. So you asked me, do I allow that stuff? Yes. I'll allow flat earth discussion, even though I don't believe in it. I allow conversations about nationalism, and I allow talks about conspiracy theories to occur because, as you and I know, over the last few years, a lot of the stuff that people claim are conspiracy theories end up being proven true within a month, 3 months, 5 months, maybe even a year. So whatever is called a conspiracy theory today, more often than not, tends to be proven true later on. So, yeah, obviously I'm going to allow conspiracy theories to be discussed on my site because, for all we know, that theory could be proven right in a short amount of time into the future.
Well, it really seems that conspiracy theory is just a label that anyone dumps onto someone when someone figures out what the system's up to or what the government's up to.
Yeah, that's generally how it works, at least from what I've seen in the last few years. If there's something the establishment doesn't want you to know is true, then they will claim that anyone who says it is a conspiracy theorist who's making stuff up. And then later on, they'll admit, oh, yeah, by the way, that person was right, but they're still bad, so don't listen to them.
And chances are they might be like kicked off, fired from everything, or even arrested. But
Yep.
you know, we won't release them to jail, and we won't backtrack and apologize.
Right. And so, yes, I do allow those things, but I don't want anyone to think that CreationSocial is like a Wild West where you can say and do anything you want, even things that may not be legal or non-degenerate. So the terms of service for CreationSocial is pretty basic. Any speech that is offensive or people find offensive or controversial, even if it's in poor taste, but it's not illegal in the United States of America, which is where I am and which is where the site's hosted, you can say those things on CreationSocial. You're not allowed to threaten people or incite imminent lawless action. You're not allowed to interfere with the operation of any kind of computer involved with running CreationSocial. We have an anti-spamming policy, but we're very specific with this policy because a lot of people can define spamming differently. And so the way we define spamming is if you're posting the same link 5 to 30 times over a span of a couple of minutes in other people's posts or groups or in comment sections of page posts or of blog posts, well, then we would define that as spamming. If a user shares their content in 5 to 10 different groups that they feel are related to the topic or the subject of their content they are sharing, we don't consider that spamming, and we're not going to punish or discipline or censor those users in any way for doing so. But on the flip side of that, we allow group admins to have full control over their groups, or page admins to have full control of their pages, or, users having control over their personal accounts. So if that user feels like the person's content doesn't belong in their group or in their comment section or whatever, we give them the right to remove that content. So that way, we don't want anyone to think that we're allowing all kinds of horrible spamming to be done, and we don't want the people who feel like they're being spammed to think that they don't have any right to remove content on their own content, basically. So that's how we define spamming, because I know a lot of people, a lot of sites say they don't allow spamming, but they never define what that means, and so basically they can use it to justify anything they want to do as far as censorship goes. Another term of service we have is we don't allow content promoting terrorism or other acts of violence. Terrorist organizations and entities we're not going to allow to be on our site because terrorism is horrible. I mean, it's literally inflicting violence on others and invoking fear in others through that violence. It's just not something we're going to allow to happen here. We're not going to allow sexually explicit or pornographic content on our site. Of course, an exception for allowing nudity would be as a form of protest, or if you're like doing a medical content that's basically educating people on, hey, this is the human anatomy, these are what these parts are. We're not going to censor that, but we're not going to allow sexual or degenerate content to be posted on our site. And then, of course, any kind of infringement on copyright or intellectual property rights of others we don't allow. But we're not going to do like YouTube and Google does, where we're the ones enforcing it. We would force the people who have the actual copyrights or the actual rights to the content. They would be the ones that contact the users and say, hey, you're violating my copyright or whatever. We're not going to basically play as their enforcer. And then, of course, we don't allow impersonation or identity theft, and we don't allow stuff related to commercial activities like finance, investments, gambling, and whatnot, scams like that. And we don't allow people to impersonate us and lead people astray as far as like spam emails and stuff, There's obviously terms of service, but I think most of these terms of service, if not all of them, I think you could agree they're pretty harmless and don't really infringe on anyone's ideas being communicated, even if those ideas are disagreed with by most of the world.
Sounds like a fair go there. I know that myself and others got stuffed over on Minds and Gab, and we got labeled as spammers. But of course, both sites never actually provided proof, and it always seems like a blanket reason just for them to justify kicking someone off.
Yeah, I remember when Minds banned you and said that they did it because you were inciting violence. I got a really good laugh out of that one because you were just mirroring your CreationSocial posts onto Gab and Minds, and you never ever once promoted violence in any of those posts that I've ever seen. So I never got how they could justify saying you were inciting violence.
I think why Minds kicked me off is because a lot of people knew I was posting the same thing on Gab and Minds and some other sites at the same time, along with CreationSocial. And I think they had to get rid of me on Minds because they would have seen that getting me rid of Gab initially would have proven that I wasn't doing anything wrong on Gab either. So it's like, well, it's clear that Minds and Gab were working together along with other groups in the background. So it's like, well, we've got to get him off both. That way, there's no actual proof anymore on both of those that he didn't actually do anything wrong.
Yep, and then you were also banned from commenting on BitChute videos, and for a time you were banned from commenting on Odyssey videos, although you got your ability to comment on there restored recently, from what I understand.
Yeah, only in the last month I can comment again. And again, I don't know how long that will last. They could just change their mind and flag me again. At the moment, I can't see certain channels. I have to actually log out and do a private window to look at certain channels. Even a couple of channels that I know the people and I talk to them, I can't even view their own ones. So I know they haven't blocked me from their channel. It's the Odyssey backend is preventing me. I'm seeing people talk about how they can't view stuff on the library backend as well. So yeah, there's definitely shadow listing and channel stuff going on there at that system. So I think everyone that uses Odyssey should make a Joshu TV account and start uploading there, because it could just be another BitChute. They could throw everyone out of under the rug again.
Yeah, although I did notice that BitChute started recently to undo some of the censorship they were doing. Like, they undid the bans on certain search terms on their search engine. So now all, thousands upon thousands of videos with Hitler in the title and Nazi in the title and all those other terms that this CST group basically forced them to ban, or that they badly need to. Yeah, you can now find all that stuff on BitChute. But I also noticed that they only did this after they had lost over $21,000 in monthly fan donations over the past year and change. So I think them doing that was more of a desperation to keep their money coming in than it was about actually honoring freedom of speech.
Yeah, it's funny how all these moral compass decisions seem to go out the window once the millions of dollars start going right down. I've seen it in corporations. They pay some person to speak and tell them how bad they are because they're white or they're Christian or they support Western values. And the idiots spend like 15K, I've heard, getting preached at. And then suddenly when their corporation / fund money starts running out, suddenly it's like, well, we better go back to actually, marketing to everyone and not trying to be a moral preacher. And surprise, surprise, all those limits get chucked out because money comes first.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Alrighty, on to the next question. What cool plans for CreationSocial or alt tech offerings do you have planned in the future?
Now, as I mentioned, I think earlier in the interview or before the show, we're going to soon be installing the newest version of the open source social network script on CreationSocial. And the reason we're doing this primarily is because there are some new components that have been developed recently for the script that are only available for the new version. They're not available for version 5.5, which we're currently using. And I actually have here on my browser pulled up some of these components. So the first one that comes up on the list is this component called Send Images in OSSN Messages. And this allows people finally to be able to send each other pictures inside the direct messenger system of our website, which you couldn't do previously. Another new component that we're going to be installing once that we've upgraded our site script to the new version is called Mark Notification. And basically what this will do is when you bring up your notifications, you will now have the option of marking things as read without having to leave the page that you're on, which you would think this would be something they would have out of the box, but they didn't. But now somebody in the community finally made a component that will actually do that for people now. And so that's something we plan on getting. There's another one called Homepage Posts that we're going to get. And what this does is that it allows users to decide whether they want to see the posts from everyone on the site in their feed, or if they only want to see posts from the people that they're friends with in their feed. And I consider this to be very good because currently it's up to the admin of the site, which is me, to decide whether you see every post on the site in your feed or if you only see the posts of people you're friends with. And currently I have it set to the latter, but once we get the new script installed and we get this component installed, people will be able to make that choice from themselves on an individual basis. So some people will want to see everyone's posts and they'll have it set to that, and others will only see the posts of people that they're friends with. And another thing that we're going to be getting once we get the new script all ready to go is we're going to be potentially looking at adding a new wallet component that actually allows you to put money into your wallet. And I don't know how versatile it is as far as what kind of what kind of money you can put in the wallet and what methods you can. It says here in the component that the default method is PayPal and that the default currency is USD, but we need to do some more looking into that before we go, yeah, we'll put that in. But then the other component that, oh my, I think I glossed over this one. I guess there's a new component that allows group owners to add other members as moderators to the group, which I didn't realize you previously couldn't do. So I guess one more we're going to throw into the site once we upgrade scripts. And then the other one that I was looking at before, the one that I really, really want, is called Group and Pages Posts Newsfeed. What this allows to happen is that if you like a page, the posts of that page will show up in your newsfeed. And if you're a part of a group, the posts of that group will show up in your newsfeed as they're made. This is huge, especially for the pages, because currently, other than the ability to create pages, you have to go directly to the page to even know that something's being posted, and that's not very practical. Like if you're a business or an organization and you want like a Facebook page and you want people to actually be able to follow you on it. Right now, there's no real incentive to do that. So I think if we create this, if we install this new component onto the new script once it's installed, I think this will actually give people incentive to make pages and encourage people on their videos and their other social media accounts. Hey, come like my page here on CreationSocial, because you'll actually be able to see their posts in your feed once you like their page. And so those are all the different components that I'm looking just at the first page of this components category on the open source social network site. Those are all the new components that we plan on installing and rolling out on CreationSocial once we've made the upgrade to the new script. But we don't just plan on upgrading CreationSocial. Because of all the censorship that alt-tech video sharing sites like BitChute and Rumble and Odyssey and Brighteon and whatnot have engaged in, we've decided that we're going to roll out our own video sharing site in the future. We're going to use the open source script A Video to do it, which is the same script that JoshuTV TV uses. So out of the box, it's going to be a fully developed video sharing site. It will have HD videos, live streaming, public playlists, an easy to use comment moderation system, and it will have a slew of other features that people who use JoshuTV will be familiar with, but if you're used to the other sites that don't have all these features, you'll find it to be very interesting. And once we figured out the money situation, we're going to use Joshu Hosting Services to host Quarter, which is the name for my video sharing site that we're going to create at some point. The nice thing about using Joshu Hosting Services is that if you donate money to us to contribute towards hosting Quarter on Joshu Hosting Services, you won't just be supporting us, you'll also be supporting Josh and JoshuTV, because that's his hosting service, and when we pay him to host the site, he gets the money, and he can use that money to further along his own Joshu project, which would include JoshuTV. So if you support Quarter, you're actually going to be supporting more than just me. You'll be supporting Josh as well. And I know from talking to him that he is more than happy and more than willing to host Quarter. And because I know he's an advocate for freedom of speech and doesn't pull shenanigans on people, I trust him to host our site. At least until some point in the future, if we're ever able to make our own dedicated, server center. and then we can self-host our own stuff. But until we can get to that point, Joshu hosting is the safest and most reliable option that I can see out there.
That sounds awesome. Oh, we'll stay tuned to that. Alrighty, so going on to the last question here. What are your thoughts on Mumble and Delta Chat compared to other things like Telegram, WhatsApp, and Discord?
Yeah, Mumble's nice. It kind of reminds me of the voice chat feature in Discord. So you could say it's kind of an alternative to that. As far as I can tell, works really well, especially with the way you can adjust your microphone settings. It seems to be more exact and specific than what you can adjust in like Discord and other similar services. So I do enjoy using Mumble. I've enjoyed it when I've used it. But Delta Chat is the one I really like because on the one hand, it mimics the best parts of Telegram that people like about Telegram, but then it's all the things that Telegram does bad, it doesn't do. So instead of being closed source, it's open source. Instead of being hosted on their own servers and being able to censor you, it's literally using the servers of your email service associated with your email account to store all your stuff. And it's truly decentralized. So basically, from what I understand from my use of it, is my email address hosts all of my own messages. And then if I talk to someone else on Delta Chat, their account and their email hosts all of their messages. So like it's being spread out in a decentralized way as far as which part of people's messages are being hosted by what. There's no central server that they can shut down. There's no central server that they can manipulate and censor in order to suppress our speech. Basically, as long as you have an email, you can use Delta Chat and no one can censor you unless they find a way to shut you down on an individual basis in terms of censoring your email.
Even if you got censored on one email, you can make another email and just re-add everyone again.
Right. And that's another thing you can do too. And plus, as far as the features people like about Telegram, you pretty much have all that in Delta Chat. You got the instant messaging, you can do the picture sharing, you can do audio recordings on the fly like you could on your phone. There's video chats that you can do with it as well. So basically anything that would have been useful for, and you can create groups too on those too. So anything useful you could do on Telegram, you can do on Delta Chat, and it's an actual decentralized system that actually champions freedom of speech, and that unlike other sites that claim they can't censor their stuff, Delta Chat really can't censor their own protocol.
They've even been contacted by several governments and agencies demanding that Delta Chat hand over info, and they've had to say, look, we don't have any info to hand over because we're not a centralized server. Everyone's using their own email backend, and because of that, they don't actually have any info on anyone. The only metrics they seem to have is how many people have downloaded the Delta Chat program from their site.
And that's the thing, too, I like about them is when you go to their site, they give you all the options for how to get Delta Chat. Like they give you the app stores that they're in, and then they give you the files for those apps so that you can sideload them into your phone, which is what I did. And they gave you the straight up download for the PC, which I have on my computer as well. And they also have it available for Mac, and they also have it available for Linux, if I remember right, like all of those different Linux variants. So I like how many different things they have it on and how easy and accessible they've made it to people to get Delta Chat, unlike other places where they're relying solely on the controlled app stores like the Google App Store and the Apple App Store, which control 95% of the app marketplace at the moment. I'm glad that they're not relying on those entirely to get their app out.
Yeah, because all these app stores are often centralized back to a certain company, and as we've found, if you have a certain idea that they don't like, you get cut off. Even the alternative app stores like F-Droid have shown they're no better than the big tech offerings, and they will censor for certain things as well. So the ability to just manually install your software, be it on a computer or on a phone or a tablet, is definitely key in this the scene we're in today.
Yeah, I think as far as its usefulness with communication and its inability for you to be censored, like the literal inability for you to be censored, I think Delta Chat's going to be very important as the censorship of websites ramps up in the future.
And Delta Chat is encrypted by default without you having to do anything, where Telegram, only the secret chats thing is censored. Encrypted.
That's something I like too, because I noticed at first, because I have it installed on both my phone and on my computer here, I noticed that any messages, by default, any messages I made on my phone, I couldn't read on the computer end, and vice versa. And I actually had to go in there and actually change the settings so that I didn't have to, see that on my end. But by default, it's super private, super secure. You can't even spy on yourself, much less other people. So I really like that.
Alrighty, so we got the last question. Not so much a question, but what would you like to say to the community?
Well, I would say that there are a lot of greasy, slimy, slick-talking salesmen out there who are the CEOs of various alt-tech sites. The guys like Ray Vahey at BitChute, Andrew Torba at Gab, Kaufman over at Odyssey, and the folks running Rumble, the folks running Getter with Jason Miller and his crew, and the folks running Parlay. All these people, they're nothing but lying grifters that just want you to use their site, and once enough of you do, they will impose all of the same draconian AI censorship systems and policies and community guidelines in terms of service that big tech does. And that's assuming they haven't done it already, as is the case with some of the people we mentioned. So you really should not be using these people. You should be using real free speech sites that are based on actual open source projects, and you should actually make an effort to get to know the people who run these open source projects. Because when I look at what's going on right now, if the alt tech site isn't being run by a lying grifter who doesn't really champion freedom of speech, the other problem I see is that a lot of the sites that claim that, it's decentralized and we actually can't censor anything you do, which is what BitChute and Odyssey used to say, that's all a pack of lies. They're able to censor stuff on their decentralized products, which proves that they're not actually decentralized. So they lied to people about their stuff being decentralized and open source in order to get you to use it. And so I think you need to make more of an effort to figure out which sites are actually open source, which ones actually have a community guideline term of service that actually honors freedom of speech. And you also need to make as much of an effort as you can to get in contact and talk with the people running these projects. People like myself. I make myself as accessible as possible. Anyone who's curious about CreationSocial, how it works, or they want to know more about the Quarter Project and how they can help make it go, I'm accessible. Josh, who runs the whole JoshuTV network, where he's got JoshuTV and Loop and the slew of other sites that he's made and runs, he's very accessible and you can talk with him about anything really related to how his stuff works whenever you want. And Charlie, I know you're going to eventually make stuff in the future because you've talked about doing it and you've done some work from what I understand. I'm sure you'll be just as accessible as we are when you get to that point. So you really need to figure out who you can access, and you need to really make some effort to get to know who's running these sites, because I think the key to whether a site really is going to champion freedom of speech or not is who's actually running the site. If the person running the site is trustworthy and actually believes in freedom of speech and actually allows freedom of discussion in terms of how he runs things that he owns, well, then that's the one you want to go with. When you have people who are lying grifters who don't actually honor freedom of speech, you can usually tell because suddenly their terms of service will have hate speech policies and policies that equate words to violence and policies that say that they can censor your content even if it doesn't violate their community guidelines. When you see that kind of stuff in their terms of service, you know that they're lying grifters who don't really champion freedom of expression. You need to get beyond surface level analysis of these people, and you need to do the deep dive like people like Charlie have done, people like me have done, people like Josh have done. You really got to get to know who the people running these sites are, because the site will stand or fall as far as freedom of speech goes on whether or not the person running it really believes it. And I know what I just described takes a lot of work to do, but we can't afford to be lazy in this time of history. We have to be diligent and we have to be dedicated to doing the work necessary to secure our freedom of speech on the internet. And if that involves even creating your own sites like Josh did and like I've done and like Charlie I'm sure is going to do in the future, then that's what it takes. You got to do what you can to secure your freedom to speak. And whether that's supporting someone who actually does do that, or if it's creating your own open source based site, that's what you got to do.
Oh, thanks for coming on TTOR today. It's awesome that people are out there spending their own money and efforts creating a space that we can talk freely without getting censored, and are optioned away from the mainstream and the big tech.
Yep, I agree. Running my own social media site is actually something I never thought I would be doing 10 years ago, but now that I'm actually running one, it's actually kind of nice to have a social media site that I control and that I know won't censor me or other people because I don't believe in that, and I'm running the whole thing. So there's actual freedom where my site's concerned, and that's something I want to have be the case with Quarter as well once it goes online. And I know that people who use my site will be just as free to speak as I am.
Well, we're heading off to an ad break now. Thanks for everyone for listening for TTR interview.